Thank you for tuning in to this week's edition of the Sun Editorial Board. We have a little curveball this week. We don't have a congressional candidate. We have a woman, I believe, from Winchester, correct?
Yes.
This is Donna Patalano. She's a Democrat, and she's seeking the Democratic nomination for Middlesex County District Attorney. So, Donna, thanks for coming in today. We'll give you the floor just to introduce yourself a little bit, then we'll have some questions. And we'll just have a discussion for about 45 minutes to an hour.
Sounds great.
Good?
Yeah, I love that.
So welcome to the Sun.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
I really appreciate it. I'm thrilled to be here this morning, so thank you for your time. My name's Donna Patalano. I'm running to be District Attorney in Middlesex County because we're at this really critical moment in the conversation on criminal justice reform. And we need to have a District Attorney who's going to lead that conversation. I've had experience as a prosecutor. I've worked as a defense attorney. I'm the past chair of the Board of Bar Overseers, which oversees the ethics of all 60,000 active attorneys in Massachusetts. And I bring all of these perspectives to the role of district attorney so that we can have a district attorney who's going to talk about both safety and social justice in a meaningful way that just isn't happening right now.
When you say that that it's not happening, what specific examples can you give us?
Sure. Well, let's start. Let me start first by saying why the conversation, I think, has come to this critical moment on criminal justice reform. In part, it's because of the work that's happened in the State House on the criminal justice bill, but I think you can also track it back to Black Lives Matter. And then through to the opioid crisis. What's happened is all of the communities understand that they're potentially one day away from being involved in the criminal justice system. When I started campaigning, I thought one of the biggest questions I would get is, I'm a law-abiding citizen. Why should it matter to me who the district attorney is, right? Because this is a race that most people haven't paid attention to. But in addition to Black Lives Matters and the opioid crisis, we've also learned some interesting things about Middlesex County recently and the Commonwealth as far as incarceration is concerned. So I can tell you, for example, in Massachusetts, we incarcerate 8 times as many Black people as we do Caucasians. I can also tell you that we incarcerate Hispanics at a rate 5 times greater than Caucasians, and that's worse than the national average. So I know those statistics, we know those statistics because federal law mandates that those statistics get collected. So I can tell you at the end of the criminal justice system in incarceration, we have gross racial disparities in incarceration statistics. But I can't tell you anything at all about what's going into the system because in fact the DA's office right now is a black box. I can tell you there are 35,000 cases in Middlesex County every year, but I can't tell you anything about who's getting prosecuted, what race they are, what crimes they're being charged with, what the outcomes are, who's getting diverted, who goes to drug court, who do we ask for incarceration on, who do we say the case should be dismissed. All of that information is not released by the district attorney.
So when you say it's a black box, I'd like you to elaborate on that. And without singling out the Middlesex office, you're from Suffolk, correct?
I worked in the Suffolk County DA's office.
You were assistant district attorney for Dan Connolly.
Yes,
up until fairly recently, correct?
I was the chief of professional integrity and ethics.
Okay, so you left that off. You left that position to run here.
Yes.
So how does that office differ in terms of your black box accusation to Middlesex County?
It's the same. And one of the things that I realized, none of the district attorneys in the Commonwealth release this data. And one of the things that's been most liberating about running for office is when you are brave enough to put your name on the ballot to run, you can actually express your opinion. When you work as an assistant district attorney, it's a great honor. It was my great honor to be the chief of professional integrity and ethics in Suffolk County. But Dan Connolly's name was on the ballot, and he got to determine what the policies were going to be. But each of the district attorneys operate as a black box. So let me tell you specifically, let me give you an example of how that works. I can tell you in Middlesex County specifically that people who are held before they get their day in court, who are held pre-trial, have increased, doubled since Marian Ryan took office. So we're holding 110% more people in Middlesex County in the Middlesex jail since she started as district attorney. Now, why is that happening? I can't tell you why. Because she doesn't release any of the information about bail requests or who is being incarcerated before they even get their day in court. And one of the enlightening things about running for office is I don't care if you are a progressive Democrat like I am, and you're thinking about somebody who's being incarcerated, who is likely going to lose their job, who is likely going to lose their apartment, who's not going to be able to make a child support obligation. I think about due process and constitutional rights when I think about that, but give me a conservative Republican, and let me tell you that if we're incarcerating somebody because they can't afford $500 bail, you are paying $65,000 a year to incarcerate that person. So somebody can't afford $500 bail, we're paying $65,000 a year. Does that make sense when the only purpose of bail is to ensure that that person comes back to court the next time? So why is it up? Why is it doubled under the incumbent? I can't tell you.
The numbers that you're referring to and the statistics that you're referring to, is she required by law, is the district attorney required by law to release those?
No.
They're not.
And let me give you another example how it works. In January, you reported on this. In fact, I think it might have been a front page story in the Lowell Sun. The incumbent released a new bail policy. I got a number of calls. Donna, your campaign's already doing some good. There's a new bail policy, and the bail policy was no cash bail on low-level nonviolent offenses. That's wonderful.
Right, I remember that now.
Okay. That's the law in Massachusetts. That's been the law in Massachusetts for a number of years. So I'm not sure why a new policy now, but it's all good to make sure that you're clear about what your policies are in the office. The problem was, I did a public records request, which I did often as a defense attorney. And when you looked at the policy, you could see the district attorney neglected to define what she meant by low-level nonviolent offenses. So once again, we can't hold her accountable for this policy. We don't know if it's actually being enacted within the office because she's not defining what it is. Worse than that, though, the district attorneys in the office received an email, literally at 3:54 on a Thursday afternoon, and I have the public records documents to back this up, and I'd be happy to share them with you. 3:54, the email goes out to her prosecutors that say, here's the policy, no cash bail on low-level nonviolent offenses. 4 minutes later, the press release went out that you got and you published in your paper. The policy and the press release were identical, not one word difference. It's policy by press release. And these policies are too subtle, too detailed to be doing policy by press release. Worse than that, the emails that came out afterwards from line ADAs, a district court supervisor who said within minutes of the policy being released, we don't know what to do when we go into court tomorrow, Friday morning, because we don't know what's meant by low-level nonviolent offenses, and there was no training on that program. So you look at this, this policy by press release and understand that we won't be able to keep her accountable. But worse than that, the people inside the office are going to have a difficult time affecting this policy because they don't even know what it means.
Has she come out with what she actually means by this
No.
since then, since
No.
January?
Nope.
So she's making it up by the seat of her pants.
Those are your words, not mine.
Yeah.
What about that, her most recent press release where, where she didn't, about ICE agents in district courts?
Yeah, I mean, it seems incongruent that she do one but not the, the other, so.
Well, let's look at that. Again, so it's either policy by press release or what I like to call leadership by letter, right? We are at this critical moment in the conversation on criminal justice reform in so many different ways. And what does the incumbent do? She sends a letter in. Doesn't it seem like we should have proactive things that are happening in the office? She's not involved in the case. She didn't file a brief. She submitted a letter. There are 2 times when she's had leadership by letter. That time, which to me is, this is appropriate, and I'll tell you my policy on that point too. But again, it's the law. in Massachusetts. All that she's saying is what the law is. The Supreme Judicial Court decided last summer that there was no authority to have law enforcement to detain people on ICE detainers. So her letter is merely what the law is. But look at the other way that she touts a letter and to show that she's a progressive district attorney. When the criminal justice bill was first proposed in the State House, a number of district attorneys got together and signed a letter that said, please don't pass this law. Do you recall that? Please don't pass this law. It goes too far. It's too much. We need to think about this and vet this more carefully. Don't do it. The incumbent refused to sign that letter. I think we are at the point where we need a leader who is willing to be more proactive than saying not taking an action by not signing the letter. Did she submit a letter that said she was in favor of it? No. All she did was say, I am a progressive candidate because I refuse to sign that letter. There are no policies. There's no way that she's handling cases within the courthouse that are making differences. That could have happened. Instead, she just is doing leadership by letter and policy by press release.
Would you have signed that letter?
No, I would not have signed that letter, but I would have been up in the State House advocating for a great deal of that criminal justice bill that I think goes a long way in working on reducing the racial disparities that are infecting the justice system right now. And I will tell you from my experience as a defense attorney, there are many pieces in that bill that are only going to make this community, our community, safer. So I would not have signed that letter, but I certainly would have taken many more proactive steps to say, we need this criminal justice reform. We are in, there's no other business in the world that is run like the criminal justice system. We invest hundreds of millions of dollars without looking at the outcomes to see if we're any safer at all. So again, it doesn't matter where you are on the political spectrum. We need this criminal justice reform. One, because it's smart. Justice is good government. But two, because if we actually want to be safer, we need to think about ways that we can stop criminalizing health problems and treat them as health problems. There's so much, and that's what's exciting about being a first-time candidate and having the different perspectives that I have. There's so much good that we can actually do if we have a district attorney who's willing to lead on the conversation instead of just step back and wait for other people to lead. And that's what's happening with the ICE case. There are other litigators in the Supreme Judicial Court on that case, not the Middlesex DA's office.
Tell me some of the things that you think are good about this criminal justice reform, because we wrote an editorial saying that the opioid epidemic is basically driving the criminal justice reform, and that we felt in some instances that they're cheapening the system, not making it any better, because of all these people who you say, I imagine you're talking about people who use opioids should be given a second chance and should go into medical treatment, but the governor's plan to put people in in mandatory treatment centers for 72 hours was shot down, said it was against the civil rights.
It was not embraced, that's for sure.
Okay, it wasn't embraced, and yet that seems like you're just keeping people alive on Narcan. The fund is going dry. The Attorney General has put more money in it, but that's from a lawsuit that she won. The state has not stepped up. The federal government has not stepped up. So it just seems like a vicious circle going round and round, and yet I can see on the horizon where this opioid epidemic would become a permanent war, like the war on poverty, the war on drugs, and it's just going to recede into the background. We're doing the best we can, but let the criminals go, let the people who continue to use it. Opioids is illegal. The illegal use of opioid, but so that is my spiel.
Okay.
And that's
where's the question?
Well, I'm basically saying what is
well,
good about it, and what is good about cheapening the law. That's what I call it, cheapening the law, make it less. You say.
I have to disagree with you.
Okay,
And let me just give you an example.
I want you vigorously to disagree.
I am happy to do that, let me tell you, because I believe strongly in what I'm talking about. I will say, so let me go back to that 110%, that people who are held pre-trial have doubled under the incumbent. And you know, I talked to Sheriff Katusian about that. People who are held pre-trial get no treatment for their substance abuse issues, or substance abuse disorders, for their mental health issues, because he doesn't know if they're going to be in there for 5 days or 5 months, right? So they can't be in any meaningful program. What happens then? As a prosecutor, I'll tell you, let's say you're arrested for illegal possession of fentanyl, let's just say, or cocaine. It doesn't matter what drug, illegal drug possession. And you're sitting in jail waiting for your trial date because you can't afford $250 or $500 cash bail. Getting no treatment at all, you're losing your apartment, you're losing your job, and then as a prosecutor, I'm going to come up and say, okay, you're facing, let's say 18 months sentence, and you're at the 12-month mark. I'm going to say to you, how about you plead guilty and you get time served, and you're going to do whatever you can to get out of jail, and let's say you're guilty. So why stay in jail for the next 2 months in order to go to trial? You can plead guilty now and you're released. Okay. What do you think is going to happen when you're released?
Back in there a couple of months.
Right. And who's footing that bill? You are. So let's talk about cheapening the system, because we're not treating health problems as health problems. It doesn't mean that people shouldn't be held accountable for their criminal activities, but let's be smart about this. The more people reoffend, the more we pay, the less justice there is, the less safe our communities are. So I don't think, so that's why I have to disagree with you about cheapening it. I think keeping it the way we do now is cheapening it.
I get that part, it's good, but where is the treatment part come in, and how do we pay for it? Do we just keep, you know, well, the millionaire's tax, I guess, is going on the ballot. Would be that's 4%. It'll probably be 8%, to 10%, to 12%.
Well, the millionaire's tax would go to,
then they'll come
right?
after me eventually, because it'll just work its way down. I mean, where do we get that money to
well,
fund
here's the
these
thing,
treatment
though. They're
programs?
already going after you. They already have their hands in your pocket.
Oh my God.
Right? Absolutely, because we are spending so much money, hundreds of millions of dollars on incarceration. What we need to do, and one of the, this is...
Finish that, what we need to do.
Okay, what we need to do, I'm terrible at finishing sentences,
No,
because I get excited about this.
we're
Let me
making
just tell you.
progress here.
All right, let me just say, what we need to do is have a conversation with folks about the fractured nature of the budget. So as one example, if I am the incumbent and I'm incarcerating 110% more people, double the people from when I took office, I don't have to justify that hit on the budget, right? Peter Katusian has to justify it to the State House. So if I'm incarcerating more people, I don't have to think about how expensive that's going to be, and I can guarantee you that's never been a conversation in the Middlesex DA's office. When I'm going to have no cash bail on low-level nonviolent offenses, but I will define exactly what I mean by low-level nonviolent offenses by the statute, and I will collect and release the data every 6 months on what bail requests were made and who was held on bail. So you know exactly what my office is doing as far as driving up those budgetary costs. But also the judges will know, because my prosecutors will be trained to say, Your Honor, this defendant can't make $250 bail. I want you to know that it will, you know, for every day that he's incarcerated, it will cost taxpayers $175. So that the judge knows what is the cost going to be, even though it's not impacting the budget of the DA's office, because part of what we need to do is think about those tax dollars and have the broader conversation in the budget to make sure that if we're saving money, because every dollar we spend in the front end is so much more effective on recidivism rates and lowering the incarceration costs And lowering, so if we lower the incarceration costs and lower the recidivism rate, that means you're safer, and your taxpayer, your tax dollar is being used in a more in a smart way.
So how it sounds very, very good, but this is like trying to turn the Titanic
In a bathtub.
Up.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, in a bathtub.
In a bathtub.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
I love that expression.
It's
And you think you'll be able to do that?
Well, if we're not even having the conversation, how is it going to happen? How about having a district attorney who leads that conversation? That's never happened anywhere in the Commonwealth.
I'm seeing a theme develop here.
Okay.
But you tell me if I'm wrong. Several European countries have decriminalized possession of certain drugs, and they view it more as they attack the problem through social service agencies rather than law enforcement. Do you support that type of philosophy?
I do, absolutely. I would not go as far.
And how far would you go?
I think the biggest piece of the district attorney is making sure that the district attorney collaborates with all of the stakeholders in the conversation about how that budget gets shifted. But the piece of the conversation that's missing now is what's happening in the courtroom. So we have this terrible opioid crisis. It is, I was on homicide response in Suffolk County. I've been on crime scenes when, the person was still clutching the needle and died, like that. So, and seeing, mothers cry. It's a horrible, horrible thing. I'm sure you all know people who've been impacted by the opioid crisis. But the issue that we have to think about is how do we effectively attack that in the courts too? And that hasn't been addressed, period. So we have this great drug court. What's the success? I don't know, because the DA's office is a black box. They have no data released about who gets to go to the drug court. What color is the skin of the people who gets diverted to the drug court? Do we know that? Do I know if the kid in Lowell is getting the same fair treatment as the kid in Weston? Absolutely not, and neither do you, as the member of a fourth estate. You have no idea
so
how
you would
equitable.
say the people who get to go to drug court are from the Westons and not the Lowells?
I can't tell you.
No, but based on everything that you've laid out here today, that would certainly be your suspicion.
I can't tell you. I would love to know. I would absolutely love to know. And the other thing is, why aren't we looking at the outcomes? How do we know treatment program A is as successful as treatment program B? Why are we investing in both of those programs if we don't know what the outcomes are? Right? This is an eye-opening conversation to have because, again, it doesn't matter where you are on the spectrum, but if we don't have a district attorney who's willing to lead on that conversation and think about who is getting the benefit of treatment, of diversion, of dismissals, of drug courts, until we know that we're being equitable, we can't have meaningful criminal justice reform. So the criminal justice bill is great, but there will not be meaningful criminal justice reform in Massachusetts until a DA is willing to stand up and say, I've had these different perspectives. I've been a defense attorney, I've been a prosecutor. I didn't go to law school until I was in my 30s. I was in healthcare management before that. I went, my son and I bought our backpacks the same day. He went off to first grade and I went off to law school. So I didn't do any of those jobs because I thought I'd be lucky enough or honored enough to be at the table here at the Lowell Sun talking about my campaign to be the next Middlesex DA. But I can tell you absolutely I will be a better district attorney because I've had every one of those experiences.
In defense of the current district attorney, we subscribe to the State House News Service, and every morning it releases a digest of what all the polls are doing. And it's interesting to note that Ryan is on that almost every day.
She has a very good press
I never
office.
see Conley, I never see Blodgett, or who's the guy from Worcester County?
So let's applaud her.
Let me finish the question. Let me finish the question.
Okay.
So I see Mary and Ryan going to all these opiate events throughout the county, and I see her convening opiate task force meetings.
Yes.
She does one once or twice a month here in Lowell.
Yes.
At Lowell General Hospital. We've covered some of those meetings. Just looking at that, it would seem to me that she's zeroed in to some extent on the crisis. But do Is that just all lip service in your view?
Oh, no, absolutely not. It's a good program. That's exactly why Jerry Leone started it when he was district attorney. Any smart district attorney would continue that program. But where's the vision? Not with the incumbent. The vision is with the person who started that program, Jerry Leone. And I applaud him for doing that. And any smart politician or district attorney would do that. Let's applaud the incumbent for having an active press office. That's where her resources are being employed. That's why you see her on the State House News Service.
What's the budget of the Middlesex County District Attorney?
Just under $17 million.
And how many people does it employ?
About 150 attorneys. I think it ranges, but $250. In fact, an interesting statistic that came out this week from the Office of the State Auditor, they did a audit of retention rates among all of the 11 district attorneys, and it turns out in Middlesex County, the worst retention rate in the Commonwealth. The average of people who leave, it's 15%.
Michael Sullivan made a big issue with that 4 years ago.
And now it's proven. The state auditor, I think when Mike Sullivan was running for office, it was an urban legend. I hear that the morale is low, that the turnover is high, that the ADAs don't have any discretion, especially in the district court. But the state auditor 2 days ago released a report, and I'm happy to send it your way, that talked about the retention fund that was given to the Mass District Attorneys Association, and it reviewed how each of the district attorneys deployed that retention fund, and part of the report was about retention rates. I know because...
Did it break it down by county?
No, but I've made a public records request, and I'll be happy to share that information for you when they respond. But the only way that they did break it down in county is they said over the 6 or 7 years that they looked at the retention rates, the worst was Middlesex County at 15%, the best, Worcester County at 5%. So triple the loss of valued and experienced district attorneys. All of them, I worked in public service as a DA, and this is true for public defenders too. I think we're the third worst paid in the country. That is...
What's the starting salary for an ADA? It's about $35,000 or something.
No, it's up now. It's 42, I believe. Right, when I started, it was a lot lower than that. But there was a special retention fund, especially targeted at those assistant district attorneys who had 3+ years, because the experience is that we lose people at about the 5 to 7 year mark in order to go, and many of them, a quarter of them, go on to other state jobs where they get a significant boost in pay because all other counsel in the state started about $55,000, $60,000.
Do you feel like you're... Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kevin.
Well, I was going to say, what you know of the Middlesex DA's budget, okay? Do you think that money is being spent wisely under the DA's discretion? Because she could set up departments and deploy those 150 attorneys any way she wants. Okay, so like she could put them into the cyber detection unit. She could put them in the homicide unit. So what would, if you had that 17 million to work with? What are some of the changes that you might make, knowing what you know about how that department is run?
Well, first, it would be good to know that information, wouldn't it? How the money is spent. That would be good.
So that's not transparent.
Nope.
She doesn't have an organization
that goes under the black box.
That is that is also part of the black box. The reason why I know the amount is because of the state budget. It's a line item, and then the district attorney, just like every other of the 11 district attorneys, have the discretion to spend it the way that they want. But can I answer that just where some of the resources are, where they don't happen right now. So just to focus on, from what I understand, doesn't happen now because again, we don't have a whole lot of information. All we have is the website, the district attorney's website. So one of the primary focuses I would have is on a juvenile and emerging adult bureau. So there's been a lot of research recently about emerging adults up to the age of 24, and this is what's recognized in Europe, particularly in Germany, but more on the incarceration end. Peter Katusian, again, has recognized this by having a young adult unit. But a juvenile and emerging adult bureau would actually recognize that the cognitive development of those young adults under the age of 24 means that they're more amenable to rehabilitation. And we need to leverage that when they're in the system, not just for first-time offenders, but for people who have been repeat offenders in the system, to bring down that recidivism rate. But the first step of the Juvenile and Emerging Adult Bureau would be to screen the case, to see what's the most effective way to handle this case, so that the community is safer, our tax dollars are used wisely, and we can hopefully pull somebody out of the criminal justice system, give them a meaningful exit strategy to be a productive member of society.
So you have a limited budget,
yes,
and limited personnel. So if you're going to form that unit, where would you take it from, and what might be eliminated?
Well, one thing is I would have a dedicated staff member who just applies for grants. I think a team member who applies for, because there's a lot of interest, especially in emerging adults right now, and the research that's involved with them. And this is something that I also did at Suffolk County, which was applying for grants to get money. One of the things I did at Suffolk County was build and run the first conviction integrity program in the Commonwealth. So it was looking at claims of actual innocence post-conviction. So the last case I worked on was a man who had been wrongfully incarcerated for 38 years. And I looked at that case exactly the same way as I did as a defense attorney, not to make sure that we affirm the conviction, but to make sure that justice was done, because that's really what a prosecutor is supposed to be doing. Are we working in the furtherance of justice? And it was a proud moment. I was honored to stand up in the courtroom and ask for his conviction to be vacated because justice had not been done. And I'll tell you, it's standing up there, you know, I was the same age as Fred Clay, the man whose conviction was vacated, and thinking of all the experiences I had since I was 16 years old, and all that he had was incarceration. You know, that, let me tell you, that really hits home when you think of a case that way. And, you know, he had not committed the crime. So the person who writes the grant is going to be able to bring in resources.
But would you have to eliminate another unit to fund?
I can't tell you that.
Okay.
I can't tell you that. But I can tell you that a district attorney builds the mission every single day in the office. And if you're building the mission by having a juvenile and young adult bureau and training people to assess those cases, to recognize the abilities of young adults, if you have a unit, a conviction integrity program that is active and looking at cases in the furtherance of justice and not just to affirm the conviction, if you have a public integrity bureau, which I will have in my office, to look both at issues of officer-involved use of force and to do investigations that involve government officials or the misuse or misappropriation of public funds. Those are important ways to use the resources within the office. Here's the primary one that I would do, is making sure that we care better for our victims and witnesses in a way that is not happening in the office. So I'll give you an example. There's a fund in Massachusetts called the Victim Witness Fund. In the last 4 years, it's been funded to the tune of $600,000. All 11 district attorneys in the AG get to use this fund. Okay? Critically important because we have so few resources for our victims and witnesses, especially witnesses involved in gang cases. It can be used to change the locks of a domestic violence victim who just got a restraining order. It can be used for first and month's last rent if a witness is afraid to testify and needs to be moved. I've used it in cases often. It's critically important. Right? In the last 4 years, there's been $600,000 available. There have been 140,000 cases in Middlesex County. There have been 2 claims to the Victim Witness Fund, $1,900 each for a total of $3,800. Your eyebrows should be raised when you hear that. That's practically criminal when you hear that, because we have so few resources for victims and witnesses. In Suffolk
Why only
County,
2 claims?
I can't tell you why. You'll have to ask the incumbent why. But let me just say, the difference a leader makes, a district attorney who's a leader and thinking about victims and witnesses. In Suffolk County, 1 year, our claims went down low. I was head of training in Suffolk County. So we had a training program for all of our prosecutors and said, listen, this is a fantastic resource for our victims and witnesses. Don't forget to use it. This is what you can use it for. This is the burden you have to show to get the money. This is the paperwork you fill out. And P.S., here's your ethical duty. This is what you have to turn over to defense attorney if you get the funds, because it's critically important that you have ethics woven into absolutely every training program you do. The next year, we went from $28,000 in claims in 1 year to $80,000 in claims. That's the difference a leader makes who's thinking about victims and witnesses and how we can better serve them in a way that I can tell you is absolutely not happening right now.
Okay. Under what conditions, okay, should a DA agree to seal records?
That's a pretty broad question.
But shouldn't it be transparent? Shouldn't you say, okay, we're sealing the records of this case? See, we've had things pop up on our radar screen, then we go back to find court cases and the records have been sealed. And yet we covered the original, the case when the person was arrested. Sometimes they even go through trials, and then, you know, we find out that all the records have been sealed when you go back.
I got a couple, I just can't think of them.
So you know a deal has been made,
Yeah.
and how does that best serve justice or society? I mean, okay, seal the records, but tell the public these records are sealed. Like the judge has to make it that when he makes a ruling, he's supposed to justify it. Half of them do it; they don't even. So shouldn't the DA have to do that too? Why they made the decision to seal the records?
Well, it's the law that's available. So that's something that you've got to fight. I think, you know, listen, as a defense attorney, I saw the power of sealing records. I had a client who had 1 felony conviction on her record. It was while she was having mental health issues and she was going through a very difficult divorce. She got 4 years probation. She served her time. She got mental health treatment. She turned her life around. In fact, by the time I got her case, the irony was her ex-husband was actually trying to help us because what do you think he found out when she had a felony conviction on her record? She couldn't get a job. Right. Worse than that, not only did he have to pay more support because she couldn't get a job, she couldn't teach her kids Sunday school class. A woman with 1 conviction on her record couldn't chaperone her kids' field trips, right? So getting her conviction...
Well, can't you say the same thing, that the whites get their records sealed and then minorities don't? See, that's my point. I mean, I think if we could unseal all the records, we'd know just how the Massachusetts system works. And that would raise some eyebrows.
Well, let's go first, before we get to that end piece, let's go first to see who's being charged and how those cases are being done.
Civil and criminal forfeiture laws. Where do you stand on that? Same thing.
I am troubled by the forfeiture laws. I mean, the fact that, you know, I have 3 kids. 1 son teaches high school in Memphis, 1 works and lives in the North End, and my daughter's a 7th grader. And I think, you know, if one of my sons had done something, and this is hypothetical, had done something criminal while he was driving my car, I would have lost that car. And the money would have gone into the civil, you know, there's a potential that the money goes in. You know, and let's say he's 19. There's the potential of losing that car. That's just not appropriate in those instances. So we need to take a hard look. And I know, you know, there was a poll last year that said that, you know, many of the Massachusetts voters are disturbed by us. So I agree that there also needs to be a bright light shined on civil and asset forfeiture. As a district attorney, I'm not going to wait for that law to be passed. You'll see transparency in my office with my budget, and I will be accountable to you. You know, I won't be just going to senior centers or high schools or hair salons. I'll continue those great programs.
I think there's a shot there, right?
Right. Those are great programs. All PS started by previous district attorneys and continued under the incumbent. I will also be in the community and be accountable to the community. Come and ask me questions. Ask me about cases that are going on. Let me tell you what's happening. Hold me accountable for what's happening in the office.
I'd like to ask you just a little bit about your campaign, because you got to watch the clock.
Okay.
You know, 4 years ago, there was a well-known assistant clerk of the Middlesex court,
think
ran
it was
against
clerk.
ran against Marion Ryan, former Cambridge mayor. If there was anyone that I thought might have been able to take a real shot, it would have been him. But she got the endorsement of the governor then and some major politicians. How is your campaign? Are you sensing any traction? Are you out in every city and town every day? Just tell us a little bit about what you're trying to do to get your name out there. And take her on.
Right. It's been absolutely energizing, let me tell you. We've been out to all 54 cities and towns in Middlesex County. We're going to start door knocking and phone banking soon. The message, once you get past that civics lesson of how powerful the district attorney is, right? And that in this day and age, when we see the White House with every tweet trying to chip away at the rule of law, and I can tell you, the rule of law in the criminal justice system is controlled completely locally by the district attorney, not checked by the president, not checked by Congress, not checked by the governor, or even our fabulous attorney general. The district attorney makes these decisions. The only people who check the DA are voters. And so that's why it's critically important as part of the campaign to have this civics lesson portion of how powerful the district attorney is and how much a difference it could make if we had a district attorney who was willing to recognize the racial disparities that impact the criminal justice system and say, I'm willing to look at that and shine a bright light on that and address those racial disparities so that our communities, all of our communities, whether they look like me or they look like the clients that I used to represent, that they are all on equal footing in the Middlesex County courthouses, and they're not.
She was, one last quick question. The incumbent was at a fundraiser last Thursday night downtown at a well-known lawyer's office.
Yes, I saw it in the column.
And I'm glad you're reading the column. How's your fundraising going?
The fundraising is challenging. I'll be honest with you.
How much money did you raise?
You know, I don't know the number off the top of my head. I think about $85,000. It's challenging when you're running against an incumbent. But we are raising grassroots money, and we're going to be effecting a grassroots campaign. There's never been a campaign for district attorney in Middlesex County that is going to be on the doors like we are. Who are looking for the endorsements of progressive groups like we are. I'm not going to get the endorsements of elected officials. That's not how we're going to win this race. We're going to win this race a vote at a time, going after people and explaining how powerful the district attorney is and how we need to actually elect a district attorney who embraces the same values as the voters in the Democratic primary.
Do you have all your signatures in? You're going to be on the ballot?
We are going to be on the ballot. It will be official next week, but we've got the requisite amount.
Do you have to get 15% of the delegate vote at the convention?
No, there's no rule in the convention for countywide candidates.
Oh, good.
We had to get 1,000 signatures. We got well over that. So I'm excited.
And you'll be willing to take part in the debate?
Yeah, I was thinking that
We
too.
have said yes to every single request. There are some people who have requested us to be part of a forum, have not even gotten a call back from the incumbent.